Want to jump in, or Tabor, or anybody?
Okay.
Looks like, yeah. My pants came from Costco.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Pinetop-Lakeside Council to order and welcome you all here. Please make sure your cell phones are silenced for us. Vice Mayor is attending a conference on our behalf and will not be here tonight. I would ask that you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kevin.
Father in heaven, we come before thee this evening, thankful for this day. We're thankful to live in our beautiful community here in the White Mountains and enjoy all the blessing that comes with that. We're thankful for the opportunity to be here this evening to conduct the business of the town. We ask thee to guide the town council and staff to make decisions that will help us to improve our town. We ask thee for a spirit of cooperation to be present with us tonight. We're thankful to live in this great country and enjoy all the freedoms and benefits that come along with that. We ask thee to be with our country during this contentious election season. Help us to remember to be respectful of everyone's right to choose and vote their own conscience. We ask for these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Kevin. Item B on our agenda is call to the public. This is a business meeting of the town council. The town values and welcomes public input. Please address the council as a whole and not individual council members. Do not address staff or members of the audience. Council action on items brought up is limited by the open meeting law. The council may direct staff to study the matter and reschedule for further consideration at a later date. Items on the agenda will not be heard or discussed in call to the public, and individuals are limited to 3 minutes. We have nobody that's requested to speak to us tonight. So we'll move on to item C, which is our consent agenda. All items listed are considered routine matters and will be enacted by one motion of the council. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of town council requests that an item or items be removed for discussion. Council members may ask questions without removal of the item from the consent agenda, and items removed are considered in their normal sequence unless called out of sequence. We've got 2 items on our consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments on any of these? Okay. Councilor Smith?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Item D is business before the council. Public comment will be taken at the beginning of each agenda item after the subject has been announced by the mayor and explained by staff. Any citizen who wishes may speak one time for 5 minutes on each agenda item, either before or after council discussion. Questions from council members, however, may be directed to staff or a member of the public through the mayor at any time. Item D1 on our agenda is the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside Proclamation of Arizona Cities and Towns Week 2024. Whereas the citizens of Pinetop-Lakeside rely on the town to experience a high quality of life in our community. And whereas cities and towns in Arizona work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to deliver vital town services such as police, fire, and emergency medical response to ensure safe communities. And whereas cities and towns in Arizona also provide services and programs that enhance the quality of life for residents, such as parks, utilities, street maintenance, sanitation and recycling services, libraries, community centers, and recreational programs. And whereas it's important for Pinetop-Lakeside to continue to provide the excellent delivery of services and programs that our citizens have come to expect in our community. And whereas it is one of the responsibilities of Pinetop-Lakeside officials to ensure open and accessible government through frequent communication with citizens using various avenues and means. And whereas through participation and cooperation, citizens, community leaders, local businesses, and community staff can work together to ensure that services provided by Pinetop-Lakeside can remain exceptional elements of the quality of life in our community. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside joins with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns and fellow municipalities across the state of Arizona in declaring October 13th through 19th, 2024, Arizona Cities and Towns Week. In witness whereof, I have hereinto set my hand and caused to be affixed the seal of the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside, Arizona, done on the 17th day of October, 2024. Okay, we'll move on then to item D2, which is a presentation by Pinetop Fire regarding Prop 437. Is Chief Morgan on the phone? Okay. Okay. So I didn't know if the chief wanted to start and then bring Nick up. Is that the plan? Okay. All right. Thank you. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor Homeland. Can you hear me okay?
Let me ask him to turn it up just a little bit. Okay. Hang on a sec, please. Rob, can you hear us? Can you turn it up?
Let's take care for the volume's working.
There, that's better. Go ahead, Chief.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor Irwin, members of the council. First of all, I'd like to thank Keith and his staff for facilitating this event this evening. As meaningful and as important as this proposition is to our community, my son is graduating from Air Force pilot training tomorrow, so this allows me to be able to attend that important event. I'm going to try and speed through the presentation, which you have before you on a couple of these pages. The first one, as an example, is just a small history. Advance that, Christy. There we go. It's a small history of the Pinetop Fire District. We were formed in May of 1958 and have been serving the community since that time as their trusted emergency services provider, starting as a volunteer agency, then transitioning to a combination and eventually a professional organization. Tonight's topic I wanted to chat with you about, you'll see in the table of contents, there are really three things that we're going to try and focus on. One is briefly about our strategic plan. Section 2, I'll talk about the proposition before the voters of Pinetop-Lakeside and the fire district. And then I'll have Nick present some of the market update and the bond conditions and what that would look like to the taxpayers if they were to vote the bond successfully on November 5th. The next page is diving right into section 1. And what I wanted to mention to you is here, this is really started about 10 years ago when we implemented our fuels mitigation crew. That fuels mitigation crew has been a stalwart in the community now for 10 years. And unfortunately, the men and women that have been doing that work in our community have been working out of Connex boxes on the site of Station 11. We've simply grown out a room to be able to house these folks effectively. Now, not only do they do fuels mitigation work, but they're also cross-trained to be wildland firefighters, and they provide some of our initial attack for wildland fire in the community. The second piece of that is this strategic plan that I mentioned, and that plan started in 2019, where we asked the community, we had two groups. We had internal groups that a survey was conducted and a community group where a survey was conducted, and we asked what was important to them. And you'll see that the number one thing was improving response times. Ensuring that we had reliable equipment and facilities was number 2, that our people were trained and technically competent, and that the least things that they talked about that were important were things like expanding services, containing costs to taxpayers. You'll advance the slide. Here's where they started identifying specific priorities or tasks that we did as an organization. And you can see, rightly so, that the emergency medical services was their single most important priority. And that's probably true for most organizations, that emergency medical services in rural Arizona is generally delivered by your fire and EMS agencies, no different for us in the White Mountains. And obviously suppressing fires is important. That was their number 2 item. And then number 3 again was the wild land fuels mitigation. So I bring those 2 points up with that strategic plan because once it was implemented and we started working on those things, the Timber Mesa Fire District and Pinetop Fire District tried to take some what I would call low-hanging fruit and identify how can we quickly address response times. And one of the things that we implemented was traffic preemption. Now, we proposed this, at the time, Chief Savage was the chief, and myself to all the fire and police agencies in the White Mountains. And unfortunately, the timing was probably a little bad in terms of financing that initiative, but Timber Mesa and Pinetop wound up moving forward, and in every single signal from the city of Show Low to the, Buck Springs Road has traffic preemption. And that helps our fire apparatus and ambulances clear those intersections and be able to move through them at a much quicker pace, both during the response and post-response, for example, to transport back to the hospital. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. So one of the other things that we asked is, from a financial perspective, how the community felt that the Pinetop Fire District was managing the funds and the operation. And you can see here that their responses were they thought that our service, only 5% thought that our service was too expensive, 58% thought we were appropriate, and 37, nearly 40% thought we were underfunded. So that told us that, and our elected body, that we were good stewards of the taxpayers' revenues to the organization. Go ahead and advance the slide. So as I mentioned, response time. This is what we call dispersion rings in the standards of cover. And I apologize, this may be difficult for you to see, but I do have a poster board there in the audience, and maybe Mr. Dodd can pull that up and show that to you so you get a better representation. But if you were to look at this from my view, the ring that's on the lowest side of that poster board to the right is Station 12, our Buck Springs station. The next set of rings is Station 11 on Pine Lake Road. The next set of rings is the proposed Fire Station 10 right across the street from Town Hall. And the next station after that is Station 13 with Timber Mesa. I'm just going to focus on those 4 facilities because if you look at the dispersion and the overlap of those rings, it really matches what we follow from a NFPA 1710 response standard. And in order to meet the initial response of a first alarm working structure fire and having that first arriving engine get there in 4 minutes, those 4 stations are placed perfectly. Now, when we were looking for property, it took 4 years to find the location that we have finally closed on almost a year to the day today, which again matches the community's needs in terms of having effective response time. Go ahead and advance the slide. So as I mentioned those things, this is really where we started chatting with our elected body on how to address facilities. Some of you may know this, but I do a lot of grant writing. Many of the grants that I've written have provided a new self-contained breathing apparatus for 6 of our White Mountain fire agencies. 2 years ago, I wrote almost $1 million grant that provided a lot of EMS equipment to many of our White Mountain EMS agencies. And last year, I wrote a congressional direct spending grant, actually wrote several of them, and we were awarded one of those, $3.3 million to build a wildland response station. In order for that to be successful, we needed to look at how we were going to finance that. And when you look at fire district budgeting, fire districts across the state have a challenge, and that we're one of the few special districts that is capped with our levy rate. And if we were to max our levy rate, in this case at $3.75, it would only bring in approximately $700,000 in additional revenue for the fire district to address capital funds. And in this case, looking at building Station 10. And I say that, and I want you to hold on to that little piece, because when Mr. Dodd talks about the payoff schedule, you'll see that in years 1, 2, and 3, it's nearly $1 million in interest and principal payment. So our district doesn't have the capacity to address capital needs and maintain operational needs. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So with that, our fire board wrestled with that decision and decided that they would go to the voters and ask them to support an $11.6 million bond proposal that, along with a $3.3 million grant, gives us about $15 million to build this co-located fire station and wildland response station that will then house that fuels mitigation crew, seasonal wildland firefighters, and allows us to continue working on getting to a qualified Type 2 interagency hand crew, which is one step below a hotshot crew. Next slide. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because you as elected officials work on finance packages and budgets. So Mayor Irwin, I'm going to ask for you to kind of query the council here. Do you need me to explain this particular slide, or do the council members, and I know you understand bonds and what they are?
So are there any questions at this point for Chief Morgan? Okay, we have no questions at this point, Chief, so you can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and advance that slide then. So as I mentioned, we're looking at Fire Station 10. And in the audience, there are some renderings, and I want to qualify that these renderings are concepts. They are not official go-to-build drawings, but as we chatted with an architect about, 1, cost, and 2, what would the footprint look like for the needs of the facility, they drew us what their vision would look like to be able to deliver services again from a fire station and a co-located wildland response station. So you have, and those same renderings are in this packet, but a larger view is in the audience if you want to get that view. So if the bond passes, we will then go diligently and quickly working with the architect to start going to full design and building something that meets the needs of the community and as well meets the financial parameters laid out by the taxpayers' approval of the bond. Next slide. So with this, I want to make sure that folks know, because there has been a little bit of misinformation that has been put out there. I think the 2 that I am directly aware of, the calculations were done on the full cash value of the property. And that is not how bonds and their levy rates are established. They're actually established off the limited property value. And Mr. Dodd does have a flyer that I would like you to take a peek at. And on the bottom of that flyer, if you don't have it already, there's a yellow section. And that yellow section actually gives 3 different models on if your home had a full cash value, in this case of $280,000, its limited assessed value would be $127,000. And the annual cost to that taxpayer would be $53.07. So while we look at folks' assumptions about this, I wanted to clear that up, that it is not full cash value, but limited property values that those rates are set at. Are there any questions based off of that slide?
We don't have any.
All right, next.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Next slide. And again, here's the rendering. So in the foreground is the fire station itself. Off to the right is a future fleet facilities repair and storage. And in the far back of this rendering, you'll see it kind of looks like a T building. That's the actual wildland response station. And it actually has dorms, again, in this concept, to house 12 to 16 seasonal firefighters. A Type 2 IA crew usually will have anywhere from 20 to 22 personnel that go out as a crew, not only fighting those initial wildfires in our backyard during the peak season, but when our danger goes away and we can afford to send those folks out, then they, just like any of the other assets within the state of Arizona, can travel to all the other wildfires that occur out west. So this is, again, the concept. And the next 3 slides give you some visual depictions of what they would look like. Again, if the bond passes, our idea is to develop a committee to help us build that facility. And we will probably bring in a few of our local lay people to help us give some of their thoughts about how they would like this facility to feel, so that it blends in with the community and gives folks a sense of pride from that perspective. So, Mayor Irwin, if this passes, I will be seeking some input from council and or Keith on if somebody from the council would like to sit on that committee when we go to design. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I'm feeling pretty positive about this, and hope that we actually can get to turning dirt here in March. Next slide. So section 3 is actually talking about the financial perspective. So here's where I'll turn it over to Nick and listen to him talk about the financing of the facility.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Chief and Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here, members of the council. Just a point of clarification, while I've had the pleasure of working with the town over the years, I am tonight here in a capacity of representing the fire district, who is also, fortunately for me, a client. The presentation that we've gone through, there are copies on the back table. We'll leave them in case somebody wanted one. This is also the flyer Chief Morgan mentioned with the orange box that you saw, those costs. We've printed off some of these and we'll leave them as well, just in case, as follow-up to the presentation tonight, there's a desire for a resident to see some of these materials. So I'm going to talk at a pretty high level about the market, the bond market, interest rates. So as the town knows, you've borrowed money over the years and interest rates go up and down, and you're subject to the rates at the time you decide to borrow. Fortunately for the town, the last time you borrowed, rates were lower than they are today. And what's happened over the last couple of years is the Federal Reserve undertook a policy of raising short-term interest rates to fight inflation. And they raised rates aggressively and then kept them there. Early signs are that's finally started to work, and the expectation is that over the next 6 to 12 months, hopefully inflation continues to moderate, come down, and if it does over time, they will start to lower rates. They lowered rates by 50 basis points, which is 0.5%, almost about a month ago now. Kind of caught the market off guard a little bit. Everyone was expecting 0.25%. Most people believe they'll probably sit tight for a while, but continue to gradually lower interest rates over the remainder of the year and into 2025 as inflation, hopefully for all of us, stabilizes and comes down to more manageable levels. When you work on a bond like this, where we have to prepare a voter information pamphlet months ago and publish it, and you have to make some assumptions, and so for purposes of the voter information pamphlet that went to the residents and has been distributed, we assumed a 5% interest rate. Today, if we were able to sell bonds today, you would probably be closer to 4%. So we had a cushion in there because we wanted to try to manage expectations, and also the goal would be to overperform, not underperform with regards to the tax to the cost payers. Obviously, if interest rates at the time the district sells the bonds, if the election is successful, is lower than what we forecast, the cost to the taxpayers and residents will in fact then be lower as well. So interest rates on a historical basis are still relatively low. We just got spoiled a few years ago when they were at these absolute low levels, when the town, I think, borrowed for the police station and pension, if I remember. We were at very, very historical low levels coming out of the pandemic in an effort to stimulate the economy. And people who took advantage of interest rates are patting themselves on the back today. And those who didn't or weren't able to, feel like we're at a higher rate, but on a historical basis, rates are still relatively low. If we can go to the next page. This kind of demonstrates that, if you will. This chart really goes back over about 30 years, and so you can see where rates were in the early 90s, and they were on a steady downward trend. There was some heart attacks or spikes up over the years for various reasons, economic things, political, geopolitical events that occurred. But ultimately, you can see a couple years ago, as I referenced, when we were in the pandemic, those rates were very low for a long period of time. And to the right-hand side of this chart, you can now see where rates have risen and started to stabilize and be probably in a slightly more historical average range than where they, and frankly, where they should be for a healthy economy moving forward. If we turn to the next page real quick, this is just pretty technical. You may remember hearing me talk about tax exempt rates. So as a fire district, it's a governmental agency like the town. They can borrow on a tax-exempt basis, so the interest earned by the investors in the bonds is not subject to taxes at both the federal and the state level. And as a result, investors will accept a lower rate of return compared to a taxable investment, say what you would invest in a company or what you might get from your bank. And they'll take a lower rate because they don't have to pay taxes. And so this chart here just tracks tax-exempt interest rates during that same time period for 10, 20, and 30 years. And really, for purposes of this discussion, the 10 and 20 year are the most relevant because that's the range where the district would be borrowing. Just real quick, this just charts in a slightly more recent time period, kind of looking at where rates were coming out of the pandemic and those ultimate lows to where they are today. If you follow mortgages or the treasury market, this won't be a surprise to you. Rates are about 2% higher than they were. Mortgages are kind of in the 6.5% to 7% range. A few years ago, they were sub 3%. And so tax-exempt rates have followed a similar trajectory and are starting to come down. Let's go, if we can, a couple slides ahead to the one called rate forecast. This is what most people really care about, where are rates going in the future? And I wish I had a crystal ball. If I did, I probably wouldn't be here tonight, but I'm here. So, and I'm glad to be here. But the expectation is that interest rates are going to be lower in the future. We expect 1 or 2 additional rate cuts out of the Fed before the end of this year, and people expect 3 to 5 rate cuts in calendar year 2025. So the expectation is that, and at that point, I think most people believe, barring unforeseen events, that the Fed would probably then leave rates at those levels because we would have gotten back to a more normalized relationship between interest rates, inflation, and where the economy is hopefully continuing to grow at a pace that's sustainable. So this rate forecast does show the expectation of rates going lower. And so for the district and for this particular discussion, our hope is that in the spring or early summer, when the district would sell their bonds, if the election's approved, that rates would actually be lower than they are today. So it would be really great if we could get in under 4%, which would be kind of where the forecast is tracking. Turning to the next slide, this is just historical growth of the district. Obviously, property values have been growing, and that affects how we do calculations around the cost to taxpayers. And if you go to the next page, you can see this just shows it in a slightly different way. This is the historical valuation for the district and their historical tax rate. And you can see over the years, they've tried to gradually increase their tax rate as the needs of the district have grown and the needs of the community have grown, but also keep it stable from year to year. Chief Morgan mentioned the max tax rate they could be at is $3.75. You see today they're at $3.35. So they are, that was the 40 cents he mentioned. They are under the statutorily allowed. Also in the gray box, just as a point of reference, we do average calculations. That becomes important when you start doing forecasts, because under state law for general obligation bonds, we have to use historical averages as the basis for what we assume for future growth. You can't just assume everything's going to grow at 5 or 10% to get the cost to the taxpayers down. So we use those historical averages. Turning to the next page. So today, well, at the time the election was called, the district's valuation allowed for up to $9.6 million to have been sold at the time, and the maximum they could seek for purposes of the election was $11.6 million. So they did, the district board did approve seeking the maximum bond authorization, and that is the Proposition 437 would approve up to $11.6 million. And as property values grow, if the district needs to sell all the bonds, they could sell up to that $11.6 million over time. I'm just going to high-level summary of assumptions. So we kind of assumed all $11.6 million would be sold. We assumed it's sold in the spring of 2025. We assumed 5%. And then we had different scenarios for the district board to look at for purposes of tax rate estimates. And they looked at 20 years, 25 years, and 30 years. Ultimately, when they called the election, they said that the bonds would not be have a term greater than 25 years. So the 30-year scenario, while it would have brought the tax rate down a little bit because you don't pay as much every year, you pay it back over a longer period of time, so there's more interest paid over that 30-year period. So they kind of settled on the middle ground. It doesn't mean they couldn't pay it off sooner if the environment was such, tax rates came in at a higher level. It also means if they wanted to sell it only for 20-year repayment term, they could. So the 25 years, the maximum not to exceed. And all of the estimates you've seen and all of the tax rate estimates use that 25-year scenario. So if we could actually just move forward to scenario 2. There we go. You guys have seen these before. I love lots of numbers, really small, hard to read. I'm just kidding. This is the estimated repayment of the bonds. So you can see over a 25-year period, the district's debt service on their bonds would be the same amount every year, similar to a car payment or a mortgage, like you pay the same amount every month. They would pay the same amount every year and pay it off over 25 years. And based on the historical valuation of the district, those assumptions that we're allowed to make under state law, we do a calculation of what the tax rate would be to the residents. That's the 41 cents that you see in a lot of the materials. And so if we can turn to the next page, this is really just presenting what you've seen already in a different format, but we break it down. As Chief Morgan mentioned, you do apply the tax rate to your assessed value, not your full cash value. Full cash is representative of market, and limited assessed value is what the county assessor and treasurer use for purposes of applying tax rates for bonds and operating dollars that governments generate from property taxes. And so these numbers should look very similar and consistent with other numbers that you've seen. Just for the benefit of the group, so the residents and you have a sense, we did leave the 1, 2, and 3, and so you could just see where some of those differences came in over time, and the district did choose that scenario 2 or 25-year period. I think with that, I would, if we could just advance a couple slides forward to important dates, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll turn it back over to Chief Morgan, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Nick. Are there any questions for Nick before he runs off? Okay, we have none. Chief Morgan, anything? Oh, come up to the, if you would, please. Yes, please. We need to have your voice on the.
Questions. The other two facilities that are being used, the one on Buck Springs and the one near your house, Lynn, I never remember the street. How were they funded?
Pine Lake Road.
Excuse me?
How were those two facilities funded?
Chief, did you hear the question?
They did. They were, as you know, Mayor Irwin, local government also has the ability to do lease purchasing. And that's how one of those facilities was initially funded. Actually, both of them were funded that way. This bond is the first time we've ever done a bond election. And again, the primary driver is because there isn't capacity for capital facilities within the normal operating budget, which at the time when those two facilities were built, there was a lot more capacity. And we also didn't have, without getting too complex in district financing, Prop 117 that affected fire districts that was implemented some number of years ago. That was a real game changer to fire district financing.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Does that answer your question?
It does. And then, since zoning seems to be a hot topic, is that property that has been purchased for Station 10 commercially zoned, or is that something?
It is.
It is, okay.
Yes, it is.
And then the last thing, Jim, is if for some reason the bond isn't approved, is there a plan B?
There is. We would have to go back to the drawing board, probably look at the lease purchase option. And that is very, very dangerous. So that's a discussion we're going to have with the board, because that max levy rate that I talked about, it would push us to that limit. And then that becomes very dangerous, because if there's any economic changes that exist out there, it can affect operations immediately.
That's it.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions for Chief Morgan right now? Do you have anything else you were going to go on and talk about?
Just two things. One of them is we had a scare. One of our alert voters who was aware of this initiative notified my office on Tuesday that when they opened their ballot, and I believe they were in Woodland Precinct number 2, it did not have Proposition 437 on the ballot. That astute voter called the elections department, as well as I did, and after their query of the voters in that district, they are telling us it's only impacted 2 voters. I bring this up because if there is anyone else out there within that precinct that does not see that proposition on the ballot, if they would let us and or the election department know so they can get a clean ballot, that's going to be extremely important. And then the last thing is, to your proclamation, Mayor Irwin, this is one of those facilities that obviously is going to have a significant impact for the next 40 to 50 years in our community in the delivery of those emergency services. One of our goals with building this facility is to bring our ISO rating down to a 2. That quick fact sheet that has been provided to you talks a little bit about those ISO ratings, and this facility would help us get there. What that does is it will, on a resident or business, generally, it would reduce their insurance premium. I say that generally. We're unique because we have a wildfire problem in the White Mountains. And if we didn't have that component in our backyard, all of our business owners and residents would have received a insurance premium reduction every time we see our ISO rate go down. So with that, again, I really appreciate your time this evening and again, allowing me to present this information to you as a council. I know it's not an action item, but I believe it's important for the elected body to understand and be a part of that future for us as a fire district. Thank you again.
Thank you, Chief Morgan, and congratulations to your son and your entire family on his successes as well. Nick, thank you for coming up tonight. Anything else? Okay, I appreciate your time. I hope the voters educate themselves on this.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on then to item D3, which is discussion and consideration of resolution number 24-1741, approving an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Phoenix and the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside, Pinetop-Lakeside Police Department. Commander Wilkie. Oh, there, we got it. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I come before you tonight for the Police Department to ask approval to enter into an intergovernmental agreement. I knew I was going to have troubles with that. With the City of Phoenix Police Department. This is for the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which is actually a nationwide program with over 61 task forces. We're looking to partner with the Arizona Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So this agreement would allow us to use them as an asset to help investigate these types of crimes with tools that we don't possess. At this time, we're not looking at taking advantage of, they also have grants tied to this with the federal government where they could possibly supply equipment or different types of things, but we're not looking at that right now. That would be a reimbursement type program. Right now, we're just looking to enter into the agreement with them to get their assistance when we need it. At the management meeting, we talked about a task force that came up here at the beginning of the month that our detective bunch participated in, where they planted some seeds to try to lure in internet predators. And they actually made 3 arrests. Detective Bunch took one of the arrests, and we got that person off the street, and he's currently in jail awaiting trial. So this agreement allows us to be an affiliate agency with the Phoenix Police Department and their task force and receive their help when we need it.
So I think we've already seen the importance of it and the success of it. So are there any questions for Commander Wilkie? No questions? Councilor Heisler?
I move to approve resolution number 24-1741, entering into an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Phoenix, Phoenix Police Department, Arizona Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside, Pinetop-Lakeside Police Department, and authorize Chief of Police Dan Barnes to execute all documents necessary to complete this agreement.
Second motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Commander. We appreciate your work on that. Item D4 is consider resolution number 24-1742, accepting a grant award for fiscal year 2024 from the Arizona Department of Homeland Security. Chief Barnes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Earlier in the year, we applied for a grant through the Arizona Department of Homeland Security for public safety hazardous material protection. And we were awarded that grant. The total amount that we applied for was $15,280. And about a month ago, I came before you on the second part of this where we got some reallocation funding in the 2022 cycle. Part of that's funded there, and the remainder of $11,961 is funded in the 2024 cycle. So this is, we'll pay for these, let me back up. The hazardous material protection equipment that we're going to purchase is gas masks. It's basically for gas vapor, particulate, canisters that go with biological and nuclear air respirators. What they're going to do is replace our old equipment that we have right now, which is upwards of 20 years old. So we want to refresh everything and get new stuff in all the patrol cars. So this will be a reimbursable grant. We'll pay for it up front, and it's not to exceed the amount of $11,961. And come for you tonight to just seek approval to move forward with this grant.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? A motion? Counselor Smith.
I move to approve resolution number 24-1742, accepting the FY 2024 State of Arizona Department of Homeland Security Grant Subrecipient Agreement 24-AZDOHS-HSDP-240106-01 and authorize the Chief of Police and/or his designee as agent for the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside to administer the grant during the period of performance October 1, 2024 through September 30th, 2025.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Moving on to item D5, which is discussion and consideration of Resolution 24-1743, revising the termination date for the Intergovernmental Agreement between Northeastern Arizona Law Enforcement Training Academy, NALEDA, and the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside. Chief.
Mayor and Council, back on August 1st of this year, I brought this agreement before Council and Council approved it. At that time, the termination date for that agreement was July 31st of 2027. Shortly after that agreement was approved by Council, the Northern Arizona Police Chiefs Association had met and decided that they wanted to change some things within that agreement coming up in next year's cycle. So we wanted to adjust the termination date back to June 30th of 2025, which aligns up for that review of the agreement for the Police Chiefs Association to make any necessary changes. So again, we're just asking for approval to amend that termination date to June 30th of 2025.
Okay. Any questions for Chief Barnes? A motion? Councilor Heisler?
I move to approve resolution number 24-1743, accepting the revised termination date of June 30th, 2025 from the original termination date of July 31st, 2027 of the Intergovernmental Agreement between Navajo County Community College District and the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside Police Department, which was approved by Town Council on August 1st, 2024, and authorized Chief of Police Dan Barnes to execute all documents necessary to complete the amended agreement.
Second motion.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second, and further discussion. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate
Mayor
it.
and Council.
Item D6 is consideration of resolution number 24-1745, approving the purchase of asphalt for Mountain Meadow Recreational Complex ADA trail from Perkins Aggregates and hauling asphalt using Perkins Cinders utilizing Navajo County's purchasing contract. Assistant to Public Works, Malena Spillman, thank you for being here.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for having me. As I always say, it's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to work with the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside. Tonight before you, we bring, as the Mayor described, the Perkins Aggregates and Perkins Cinders contracts. We are scheduled to purchase 1,400 tons of asphalt, and we have a pending approval tonight, a target paving date for the Mountain Meadow ADA path of November 4th. It's a little over a mile. It's about 1.2 mile ADA path, very similar to what we did over at Woodland Lake Park. As you're aware that we've talked about in budget meetings and some of our council discussion workshops, our goal is to really bring our parks and our community up to a ADA compliant standard so that opens the door for all of our citizens to enjoy our parks. Another item that kind of played into this is when we got the survey back from the community, one of the main things that they wanted is recreation paths and paved recreation trails. We have hundreds of miles of mountain bike hiking trails, but not the paved. So this opens that door for us to complete that. If you've driven by Mountain Meadow, you'll notice the path is looks like it's almost complete. We just have to pave that, and then we have a concrete proposal that we'll be bringing back in November as well. This was a grant that we applied for in 2020, and we entered into an agreement with Arizona State Parks and Trails in 2022. It was a $200,000 grant that we received, and a portion of that $200,000 is going toward the asphalt.
Okay, any questions for Elena? Councillor Krigbaum.
I move to approve resolution number 24-1745, authorizing the purchase of asphalt for the Mountain Meadow Recreation Complex, MMRC, ADA Trail from Perkins Aggregates and hauling asphalt using Perkins Cinders, utilizing Navajo County's purchasing contract. Supply of various roadway materials. Number B2402006, in an amount not to exceed $161,938, and authorize the town manager to execute all documents necessary to complete this transaction.
I second that.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Malena.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to that. And just so everybody knows, Councillor Krigbaum is going to be out there operating the paver on a couple of those days, I believe. So
We're very excited about
Looking
having her
forward
come
to
back out.
that'll be her retirement job, right?
Right.
Anyway, thanks, Malena.
Thank you.
Moving on to item D7 is consider adopting the Town of Pinetop-Lakeside annual pension funding policy for the Arizona Public Safety Personnel Retirement System for fiscal year 2025. Kevin.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. What we have for your consideration tonight is the passing of our annual pension funding policy. It's something we have to do every year. In 2018, the legislature passed a requirement for any municipality or governing body that has a PSPRS pension plan has to adopt an annual funding policy, place that on our internet, and make it public. So what we have for your consideration tonight is the annual update. If you'll look at the policy in your packet, the verbiage is exactly the same as what you've seen every year. The only changes are the numbers and the percentage of funding. So if you go to the policy and look on page 2, we have listed what the assets are in our PSPRS fund and the liabilities. The assets are a little over $9 million and our accrued liability is $9.9 million. So we're currently at 90.9% funded. If you remember, back on July 1st of 2021, Council passed just under $7 million in bonds to fund our unfunded liability. So at that time, we were 30.4% funded. And at the end of, they're always a year behind, so at the end of June 30th of 23, we're at 90.9% funded. So if you approve this, we will place this on our website and send it in to PSPRS.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions? I think this is just a standard thing that we don't have much choice, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Counselor Heisler?
I move to adopt the pension funding policy for Arizona Public Safety Personal Retirement System for fiscal year 2025, formally accepting the employer's share of the assets and liabilities under the system based on the system's actuarial valuation report, and authorizing staff to post the policy of to the town's website as required by Arizona Revised Statute 38863.01.
I second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Kevin. Item D8 is Town Council Committee Liaison and Town Manager Monthly Report. I'll start with Councilor Krigbaum.
I have no report, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Phillips?
I attended the White Mountain Animal Shelter meeting last night, and they reported they had a very good turnout for their Happy Tales. It wasn't a record breaker, but it was real close. They did very well, so they're really happy with the turnout and the support from the community.
That's great. Thank you. Councilor Heisler?
I have nothing to report.
Councilor Smith?
Yeah, a couple things on Arizona Alpine Trail. We had a really good meeting this month with state parks as well as the Forest Service, and the trail is complete now. The Forest Service has approved all of the links and all of the little pieces and parts that we put together for this 750-mile trail. So big deal there. Today we spent the day with volunteers from the Arizona Alpine Trail and WMOTA helping the Forest Service clean up the forest. We picked up trash from near the transfer station and where the Maverick Trail comes in at Burton Road and Lone Pine Dam Road. And Arizona Alpine Trail has a grant from Waste Management to pay for stuff like that. So we paid for it. And it was about $100 to dispose of the trash of 2,500 pounds of trash that we collected today. A ton and a quarter of just stuff. So that's my report.
Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. Councilor Snitzer?
Thank you, Mayor. Trax is winding up our trail work year, so Monday will be our last day, and we're going to spend it working on actually a new trail that'll be from Mountain Meadow Complex near where the restrooms are over to the Hitching Post Trail, and so we will. It's about a quarter-mile trail, and we expect to have about a dozen people there show up to do the work. Our trail crews have been great all this year. Trail crews are in the low to mid-20s, so we've had really, really good response to our trail work. And then that'll wrap up the year for Trax. And then at the Nature Center, upcoming event, the nearest one is Dan Grubner on the 26th, which is our Fall Festival Day. That evening, if you enjoy Fall Festival, stop by the Nature Center, and he's got a presentation on the endangered Chiricahua frogs. We're planning a board retreat in January to plan out our next year. The bird show, we expect attendance to start falling off, but so far it hasn't. We've had nearly full crowds almost every day, so people are still really, really enjoying the bird show. And then the last thing I'll mention is the store. And the store is, if you haven't been there, you've got to go. The store is selling at a pace 3 or 4 times higher than it was last year, just because we've got so much more stuff in there. Really, really great merchandise. And with Christmas coming up, these are all things that you won't find, generally speaking, anywhere else in town. Certainly not at Walmart. They're nature-oriented gift items, some made locally, some we purchase and resell. So it's worth a trip. And Nature Center continues to rock along. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Snitzer. Councilor Smith?
I'd like to come back with one item. We're serving lunch at the senior center, Halloween. So
Yes.
love to have council and staff help us out on that day. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you for that reminder. I don't have any specific reports, but I would just like to congratulate our staff on another successful color run. We coordinated with the new chamber on that, and thank you to Tony and Annie and Public Works and all our VIPs, and it takes a village to make something like that happen, so we have a great team. So that was a great event. Keith? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Krigbaum.
Could I amend a little bit of what Councilor Snitzer said? Trax is going to do 2 trails. The other one is very short and it's already pretty much a social trail. But this will make it possible to do high school mountain bike races in Woodland Lake Park using the parking facilities of Mountain Meadow. So bringing the 2 together is going to be a real big help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Keith?
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council. I'd like to thank everybody, the Town Council, staff, the community for supporting the recent Fall Festival Parade. It was our 40th anniversary of incorporation for the town. It was our Ruby Festival celebration. So we're really thankful to be able to celebrate that. And we had over 50 entries. The Dance Academy received the Mayor's Award. They had a beautiful float and a lot of participants. There were thousands of people lining the streets. And so overall, it was just a great event for our community. Just to add to what Mayor Irwin mentioned about the color run, we had about 250 participants. That may be the largest group we've had so far. And so it's continued to grow each year, and it's a great family event. So I'd like to thank everybody for their support there, especially the Chamber of Commerce too. The Chamber of Commerce for Pinetop-Lakeside, Walking Down Ranch, and many other businesses. We have our Autumn Fest, which replaced our traditional trunk or treat. That'll be on Saturday, October 26th. There'll be children's activities, live music, costume contests, a chili cook-off, and more. And the event is scheduled from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Mountain Meadow Recreation Park. We hope everybody can come out and enjoy it and have a good time. Be a beautiful day. Monday, November 11th is our next flag ceremony with the VFW Post 2364. This is our Veterans Day flag ceremony. So a good day to come out and support our veterans on that day. That's at 11 o'clock on November the 11th here at Town Hall. Christy has added, okay, let's see. She wanted me to mention that Town Hall will be an early voting site on October the 25th from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So you can come, get a ballot here, or bring your ballot, hand it directly to them. I utilized that during the primary. It was a great opportunity. And we'll also be the Election Day voting site on November the 5th from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. So, is there anything else?
Okay. All right. Thank you for being here, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.